Hello, and thank you for joining me on episode 2 of the Successful Failures podcast. Episode 2, we are here. We passed episode 1, which is progress. Man, I'm so excited for today's conversation. Today, we have Amber Irvine on the podcast, and we have a practical conversation about faith, religion, church hurt, as well as what love is and how leaders can lead well and avoid the trap of assuming that because their intentions are correct, they're making good decisions. One of the benefits of this conversation specifically with Amber is that she was someone that I mentored when I was an intern in youth ministry years ago. And now that we're friends and she's married, we have a candid conversation about the things that I did wrong as a leader, as well as where I've improved over the years, and just listening to her and being a good friend and a good leader. And I think this will be a really good conversation for those that either have had church hurt and been hurt by leaders in the past, or for current leaders right now and how they can approach hard conversations or just lead well, not only with the right intentions, but with the right actions. Now, a few housekeeping rules. Once again, this podcast is completely done by me. I film it, I edit it, I record it. It's all me. And because it is an unscripted podcast, the conversations go everywhere. The pros of this is that I think it's very honest in conversation, and I think that it's useful. The cons are sometimes I make mistakes. And I made a couple quick mistakes. We were having some issues with one of my cameras on this episode. So Amber isn't really in focus, and there's a small section where just the clip cuts out for about 20 to 30 seconds. So I do apologize about that. I was originally thinking about possibly re-recording it, but the conversation was so good, I didn't want to try and fake that. The whole point of this podcast is to be authentic and real, and I felt like the conversation was authentic and real, so why change that? So anyways, if you wonder why one person is out of focus, that is exactly why. Episode update number 2. We actually are now on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. That is where we are at. I'm very excited for this. It feels kind of surreal to be on some of the major streaming platforms. So if you can't watch this on YouTube, you can always check us out on one of those streaming platforms. And it really does matter. Getting more views does bring us up in the algorithms, and it means a lot to me too. Also, if you just want to support the podcast and don't necessarily know how, we have some payment information in all of our video descriptions, and eventually we will get a website with memberships where you can just support us monthly, help us get nicer things, do nicer stuff, and not make the same mistake with cameras again. So without further ado, this is the episode with Amber, and just letting you know, as we were talking, just as friends, I actually turned on the recording, so we're just going to jump in right into a conversation about a trip she had with her in-laws in the mountains. So here we go.
And because it was supposed to be like that day, the one day we decided to go hiking, we had tornado watches. We had hail warnings. We had like severe thunderstorm warnings, flood warnings.
Like God saying no.
We were like, well, we have like an hour and a half. We'll go. And so we were running behind because we were like, we gotta like hurry up and beat the weather. And we get to I was talking to Rick, and I was like, hey, like I need coffee. I was like, we're driving past this little coffee shop in the mountains. I was like, can we stop? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, okay, cool. Like I knew he would say yes. He always says yes. And we're in the car, and he says to Chelsea, he's like, oh, I'm stopping for coffee. And she was like, Rick, why? And she was like, I thought you had coffee. And he's like, no, I didn't get to finish it. And she's like, you're really going to have coffee right before we go on a hike? You're really going to do that? And he's like, yeah, I really want coffee. I really want it. And she's like, Rick, come on. Why do you? And so I blurt out, I'm like, it's for me. And he goes, yeah, it wasn't for me. It was never for me. I was stopping for her.
What a great guy. Jeez.
And then she was like, okay, fine. Because she didn't care if it was for me.
Yeah.
But I was laughing, and she was like, he has this weird obsession with being the best father-in-law in the world to you, and like the best father-in-law in your life. And I told her, I was like, well, to be fair, I don't think I'm ever going to have another father-in-law in my life. He was like, yes. I was like, I think you win there.
I actually have this recording right now.
Oh wait, we're recording.
Honestly, I kind of just want to go from there. Mm-hmm. Why do you think having a father-in-law that actually cares about being a good father-in-law is so rare? Like, what makes that special? Like, why is he that way?
I don't know. I think what makes it special to me, I guess, is because I hear all these like monster-in-law stories where it's just like, oh, I hate my in-laws, and like there's like that whole like running joke where you say like, oh, I'm going to the in-laws, and people are like, oh, I'm so sorry, and like I just feel like I don't know why it's so rare. Like, I mean, my mom was best friends with my dad's mom like her whole life. And so it's just, I don't know, it's always been weird to me that people like hate their in-laws, or like that people have terrible in-laws.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know. I brag about mine all the time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a really cool thing, because I know friends that they have the worst in-laws. Yeah. And just hearing that you like being around your in-laws sounds amazing. Like, do you think that's the way that they were raised? Do you think it's not like a conscious thing that they do? Or do you think that's more of it just kind of happened that way, I guess?
I think it's just who they are as people.
Okay.
I mean, like, just as people, they've always been, even I've noticed to like Riley's friends, my friends, his siblings' friends, like they just act like very loving people. They're very like, people. Yeah, they're very open. They're very like welcoming. They'll like, as long as you're not like a terrible person, like they'll treat you like one of their own kids. And I think a big thing to do with it has to do with their love for God, and like the way that they were raised in that, and like just the whole concept of like we love because he loved us, you know? Yeah. And I think that definitely makes a big difference. Yeah,
and that it's weird because, you know, obviously we're both Christians, and we both have grown up in the church. We both have been working in the church in some various capacity, and yet I've experienced, especially recently, it seems like sometimes Christians can be extremely unloving, which is ironic. Do you think that they were at a church that really practiced that, or do you think that was more of them having a personal relationship where they dove into the word themselves? Like,
I definitely think it's a personal relationship, because knowing them, like, and even like comparing it back to my parents being in-laws to Riley and stuff too, like I think the love really stems from like that personal relationship with God, because you can't learn that from just a religion. Like you can't learn that from just going and learning stories or going and learning. Like that doesn't happen until you've actually like experienced the love that God has for you.
Yeah.
To be able to like overflow that onto other people.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I also think that with your story, knowing a little bit of it because I've known you for so long, I think part of that comes from just hurt and pain. And I feel, because I've met them like once or twice just randomly, and they are extremely honest and real people. Mm-hmm. And I was actually talking to my dad recently. I'm like, that's rare. Like in Christianity or outside of Christianity, to have people that are just kind of upfront with who they are. Mm-hmm. Why is that attractive, do you think?
I feel like we live in this world where like people kind of just tell you what you want to hear most of the time. And a lot of people will just, because they don't want to deal with raw emotion. I feel like everybody deals with so much raw emotion of their own that they don't want to deal with other people's raw emotion. And so it ends up just being like, oh, like, you look so good today. When in reality, like your hair is a mess or something, like, or whatever. But just like, I don't know, I feel like you can bring your problem to someone and they'll just tell you what you want to hear because they don't want to deal with it. Or they just don't care enough. But I think it's really important to have like even with my in-laws, like they are very raw and honest with me, even about things that maybe I don't want to hear, or like just telling me if I'm in the wrong for something, or telling me maybe to check myself about something, or but then like on the flip side, also like validating my feelings and stuff, and validating what I feel or my fears. Or we were just at lunch with them earlier, and I was talking to my mother-in-law about just all the health anxiety that I have and that I've developed in the last couple of years. And I was talking to her about how like every single day of my life, if I get a headache, I think I'm having a stroke. Like I think I'm having a stroke or have a brain tumor or something. And like I've had scans and all sorts of, I have no reason to believe that. But like I was talking to her about it, and she was validating that, for one, like validating it and saying like, hey, like you're feeling these things, and valid, you know, but also on the flip side, like, pray about it, talk to God, let yourself sit alone, feel those fears, feel those emotions.
Yeah.
And then like ask him, like, where is this coming from? What do I do to get rid of it? Where did it come from? Like, and just kind of like guiding me through it, but like validating me, but also telling me like, hey, you need to maybe like grab this thing by the neck and figure it out.
Yeah. And man, that brings me back to like when I first met you, because I did a terrible job with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's been great about watching you and your development is seeing a lot of my failures as like a friend, and how I could, I didn't have an understanding of anxiety or any of just mental health in general. And now that I'm older and I've gone through my own stuff, like I feel like I understand it on a deeper level. What? Oh, I'm ready for this question. What did I do in the very like beginning of our friendship that did not help in the slightest? And then how have I gotten better? Because I don't think I'm perfect in this area, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody's perfect in the area.
Yeah,
I think even like dealing with it so intensely, you don't know how to navigate it fully. But what did you do that was wrong?
Yeah, you're ready for this.
I have a list. No, I actually keep tabs in my phone.
Oh,
Yeah, I hold grudges. No, I don't know. Gosh, trying to remember back that far is weird. I remember I guess we'll go back to when I first met you.
Yeah.
You were trying to recruit me for human video.
Yeah.
And I was like,
I just recruited
you. I didn't even know who you were. I knew who you were because I had heard of you or whatever.
Yeah.
And I had seen you with your stupid little fedora in high school. But
God. I hope there's no photos on the internet about it.
I'm sure there are. But I don't know. I just remember you just like came up to, I was in a weird point in my life where like, I don't know. I was just like really strayed from the church. I was really strayed from God. I was like, you know, in my rebel era, I don't need this. I'm my own person, whole 15 years old. Like, and I would sit like outside of the church every time we had service. And I don't know. I remember you came up to me and you were like, "Oh, like you're a dancer, right?" And I was like, yeah, who are you? Like, why do you know that?
Oh, I didn't even know you at that time, did I?
No, you didn't.
Oh, geez, that's even worse.
Yeah, and so then you were like, oh, you should do human video. And I was like, what the heck is that? I was like, what are you talking about? And you were like, yeah, we have auditions for it. You should come do it. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And then you were like, see you there, and you walked away.
You didn't even audition. I just put you on the team.
I did an audition. I showed up. I wasn't going to show up for the audition. I actually was showing up to tell you, just to give you the courtesy and tell you, hey, I'm not doing it. Like, don't count on me. You didn't give me a chance to speak. You said, hey, I took into consideration how long you've been dancing, and I put you on the team. And then you walked away. You didn't let me respond. And I was livid because at the time, not only was I an angry, angsty teen, I also, like, didn't really have friends at the time. And it was like this weird thing where I wasn't going to KO, and like I just
to your youth group, yeah.
I wasn't going. I was at this point where I wasn't going to my youth group, and I wasn't going to like, I don't know. It was just a weird point, and I was super anxious around new people, and super anxious in situations that I like was uncertain of, and I don't know. I just really didn't want to do it, and I remember I was so angry at you and I hated you because I remember my mom brought me to the first practice and forced me to do it. And I was so pissed. I got out of the car and I got into the gym. And I just remember sitting there staring at you like this the whole time. I was so angry. Death
stared at me the entire class.
I did not want to be there. And then guess what? At the end of the class, you assigned me as Satan. You said, you're going to play Satan. And I went, oh, okay, I see what you think. But no, I don't know. I just, every time I would like, I feel like, I don't even know where it happened where like I stopped hating you and then like started kind of confiding in you. But like at some point in there when I did start confiding in you about anxiety, I just remember you kind of being like, oh, just get over it.
Well, and you know, a lot of that is partially me not understanding that. Me believing that if you have anxiety, just saying, "Oh, just get over it," and that will be the answer to everything. But even in that like story of talking to you, it's funny, like the lack of consideration about your emotions and feelings in that is it is both surprising and not surprising.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I feel like that's such an easy thing for people to do. Like for people that don't deal with it, like for instance, my dad has never dealt with anxiety or depression or like any sort of mental health issue. That's just never been his field. He doesn't deal with that. I mean, just in his life in general, he's just been a kind of like pull up your drawers and get over it. Like just, grab yourself by the bootstraps.
Well, I think part of that's also it worked.
Yeah, but like, I don't know, he's just never struggled with anxiety and stuff. And so for me, my mom and my sister to all deal with panic attacks, like debilitating panic attacks for our whole lives, he just didn't understand it. And so like in a similar way, it was very invalidating a lot where he was just kind of like, I don't get it, just get over it. Like just stop worrying.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as years went on and he actually experienced a panic attack himself, which I think was the turning point for him, because I remember when he was having the panic attack, he was like telling us he wanted us to take him to the hospital because he was like, I can't breathe, like my heart's racing, I'm sweating, like you don't understand. And it was right after his mom passed. And so like we knew he was in a very anxious state and like he had never experienced that before, so he didn't know really.
He has no language for it.
Right, he didn't really know what it was. And my mom and my sister and I were all trying to tell him, you're having a panic attack. And he's like, no, you don't understand, it feels like I'm dying. And like we were like, yeah, we know, like that's what it feels like. And it's a very physical thing that happens with it. And so he just wasn't grasping it. And he's like, no, you don't understand. And we were like, we do understand.
Yeah.
And ever since then, he kind of like had a little more sympathy and understanding for it. And it's actually really cute because I remember one night he heard me having a panic attack in my room at like 2 a.m. And he came into my room. He pulls out his phone. He puts his little glasses on and he's reading. And he's like, Amber, can you tell me 5 things that you can see? And he starts doing this grounding exercise with me that he researched.
Wow.
I never told him about it. He had never like heard of it. He researched it on his own, found a grounding exercise and started like doing a grounding exercise with me to help calm me down. And it wasn't even the grounding exercise that calmed me down. It was the fact that he was like making this effort to understand and help and like actually validating that it is a real thing, because now he gets it, and now he's like always finding all sorts of different things to send me about how to help anxiety and like coping mechanisms and things and stuff. And
what
I don't
a good
know.
father, man.
He is. He's awesome. But I feel like it just takes either experiencing it yourself or educating yourself.
Yeah, and I think part of like what really stood out to me in that story is the fact that he didn't fully understand what to do, but he was trying to.
Yeah.
And I look in my past, and obviously like I didn't understand it, and I just didn't try. And I know like me putting you on that team was coming from a good place, because I knew that what you needed was like friends and community, and that was one way that you could get it. But I think that the lack of just trying to act like everything's a sledgehammer, and just sledgehammering what you need. I learned this actually. I learned this in teaching. Like you don't tell kids what they need. You ask questions and let them kind of figure it out on their own, because if you tell them, they don't actually take it because it's not their idea. It's not, how have I personally gotten better in that area over the years I've known you?
I think
I haven't.
You haven't actually improved at all in anything, Drew.
What a loser.
I don't know. Can you rephrase the question again?
Yeah. So, well, let's take that example of acting like everything's a sledgehammer, and you just need to do this, and not like.
Yeah.
How have I gotten better at listening to you and trying to understand where you're coming from?
I feel like maybe through. Funny enough, I think it might be through me being tough on you and being like, hey, you're being mean, can you stop?
Yeah.
I think it was a lot of like me and like maybe some other people too, but just kind of being like, hey, I feel like I maybe got fed up with it and was like, hey, stop acting like that, like it's hurting my feelings or it's invalidating my feelings. And so I feel like it maybe caused you to evaluate yourself a little bit. And then also just I feel like maybe going through things yourself just kind of made you more aware, I guess. And just, I don't know, I feel like as you grow just in general as people, if you're going in the quote unquote right direction, like you're gonna grow and you're gonna like just over time you just learn. And I've learned that like myself with things that like over time, even if you don't feel like you're actively doing things to grow or learn, you grow and learn regardless. Like life makes you grow and learn.
Yeah.
Whether it happens over a year or over 10 years, like you eventually grow and learn things. And I mean, you're constantly growing and learning every day. So like, I feel like that's probably mainly what happened, is just you just gain experience by doing more stuff and meeting more people and experiencing more things, you know?
That's a good answer. Why do you think it's hard for people to fail, I guess?
Hard for people to fail.
Yeah. Like I look back at those times of like there were some successes, but I felt like there was a culture in hindsight of basically admitting that you failed or struggling or anything like that was being, I don't want to say, I guess, kind of less holy or like not trusting God enough. How have you gotten to this point where you can admit like, hey, I got these struggles, and also say like, I know God's got me, and I also know that I have ways that I need to work on. Like how did you get there to, or are you still working on that, I guess?
I'd say both. I think just with my life and all the things that I've experienced, I feel like I had to either succeed or fail. Like I felt like in everything I did, it was either succeeding or failing. And I think I had to realize like sometimes failing isn't really failing. I don't remember who said this. I think maybe Albert Einstein or someone said something
someone
to the
smart.
someone
in the
smart
past, that's dead.
someone smarter than me said something to the extent of like, there are no failures, only lessons learned, or something like that. And like, I kind of, don't quote me on that. That is not verbatim.
No,
but
I'm not going to write it down.
I think, I don't know, I kind of had to start viewing failures as like, and I'm still teaching myself this. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But just trying to remind myself like failing at something, quote unquote, isn't always a failure if you learned something from it. Like if you learned something and are growing from it, it's not really a failure. It's just you didn't get the outcome you wanted, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like a lot of times with failures, like I view things as failures that aren't really failures, and I have to remind myself of that. Like, I don't know, just like moving back in with my parents. Like I've been married for 2 years and we're moving back in with my parents, and like we can't afford to live on our own, and that's like frustrating.
Yeah.
That's hard. And I keep telling myself I feel like a failure. And I'm like, I have to reevaluate. I was actually just saying this yesterday, but I have to reevaluate that and think like, how could I have failed at that? Like, how is that a failure on my end? Like, if anything, it's a failure on the economy's end. Like, it's a failure on the government's end, because like nothing is affordable for anyone.
Yeah.
It's nothing I'm doing wrong. It's just the world that we live in right now, and just you just can't afford anything. And that's not, I didn't fail at that. And so I feel like a lot of times we as people can view things that aren't failures as failures because we like to blame ourselves for stuff.
Almost like kind of putting the weight on ourselves.
Right. At least, I mean, certain types of people. There are types of people that want to put the blame on anyone but themselves, which I've had experience with.
Yes.
But then there's also people, I feel like myself, where I will put the blame on myself before I put it on anybody. And it's even if outwardly, like externally, I blame other people, internally, I'm still blaming myself. And like blaming people externally is just a coping mechanism for blaming myself, because I'm tired of blaming myself. Yeah.
Well, and it's hard to, I mean, the process of feeling your feelings and understanding how you actually, what you think and why you're thinking it is a very, I don't want to say emotional process, because I feel like it's just very unnerving in a sense. And even in like the process that I take in therapy, or, you know, with some of my like really close friends where I'm just kind of saying how I really feel, or like with you, there's freedom in it, but it is uncomfortable, and kind of realize like the uncomfortability isn't because it's bad. It's because it's actually getting to the root of the issue. It has been hard for my brain to like understand in a sense. Does that make any sense at all? We've talked about your, I guess, previous experiences with churches, and you're still a Christian. And I actually didn't realize that you're still going to church. I thought that you wanted to take a break and some time away. talk to me, not necessarily about like what the experience was like, but how did running into that stuff really affect you spiritually? Because I talked to another guy last week, and we were explaining that I think the reason why church hurt is so hard to work through is that it hits you on a spiritual level in a way that nothing else really does. And it's supposed to be like a place where you feel confided and safe. And because that's taken away, it cuts deeper.
Yeah.
So what, I don't want to say what happened, but how did you work through that? Or what were the feelings and emotions through that?
Well, I mean, I was born into the church. So, I mean, like, my mom worked there when she was pregnant with me. So, I was always at church.
You were born at church.
I was born at church, pretty much. So, it was a very normalized thing in my life. It was just kind of like going to church. Like, that's normal.
Yeah.
And in a sense, it almost, like, kind of numbed me to church in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I've actually been unboxing that, which I'll get into that in a minute, but I've actually been kind of unboxing that recently. How that kind of just became like I just kind of became numb to like the idea of the Bible and everything. Especially doing Bible quiz and stuff where you have to memorize everything, like, and it just becomes a game at that point. But I don't know, I grew up in the church and it was a very normal thing for me, and I knew everybody knew me. I went to the same church for 19 years, 18 years, well, 19 if you count the womb, but
we do count that.
And I don't know, I started going to the youth group when you recruited me.
It was forcing.
And honestly, it was really good for like a stretch when we didn't have a youth pastor, and it was just kind of like team led in a way. Like, I honestly feel like that was the peak of the youth group.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have some leader we were hailing. And should I say that? I don't know if I should say that, but
it's up to you.
Anyways, so it was just, I don't know, it was just a really good time there. But then we got a youth pastor. I don't know, it turned very bitter very fast, I feel like, especially for me. Because he kind of liked to pick favorites and put all the other students on the back burner, kind of.
Yeah.
And me having cancer in high school was very funny because I very quickly turned into the poster child for the youth group. It was very much like I don't know, clickbait in a way. It was like, oh, look, one of our students has cancer and we're going to pray for her and stand behind her. And it was actually really funny because I'm going to air this. It was really funny because when I was in the hospital for the first time, like getting my surgery, like my port insert and like everything like that, the pastor and one of the leaders actually came to the hospital, and they came to the hospital. They gave me a quick, like, 30-second prayer, took a picture with me, and then left. And that was pretty much it. And then they posted on the actual, like, youth group site or whatever, like, oh, one of our own has cancer. She's battling this, and that. And so we went to the hospital and hung out with her today and you know, just really prayed for her and spent some time with her and whatnot. And I remember reading it and laughing. And I was like, that's just really funny because that's really not what happened. Like, but
it almost felt like that they were, I guess, faking how much they were in it.
Well, yeah, or? it was a publicity stunt for them. You know, it was this whole thing of like, oh, that's really cool. We can use this, and like it was almost every single sermon. It was like I was name dropped. It was like. Just one of our own, you know, as an example.
I didn't notice that at the time.
Yeah, it was like, oh, as an example, like Amber has cancer and she's a beast and battling blah, blah, blah. And like, I don't know, that was all that was ever said. But anytime I actually asked if I could talk to him or get coffee with him or meet with him or anything.
Silence.
Yeah. I never got a response. I never got, you know, it was, oh, maybe another time. And it was like, okay, so you just want my bald head for your pictures on social media. Okay, that's fine, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's just really funny. Like, I was even chosen, you probably remember this. I was even chosen when they were doing like the sermon photo things. And there was this one we did, I don't even remember. Oh, it was called Alien.
Oh yeah, and I took that photo. I took that photo.
I was the main star for that with my little bald head, and I was like, that's actually kind of messed up.
Which
now
was
that
funny.
I think about it.
It was funny because I'm actually the person that chose you in that, but I didn't choose you for your bald head. I chose you because I felt like you would be the perfect person for it outside of it.
Yeah.
But it is weird how like the way that was handled was wrong.
Yeah.
And it almost kind of permeated through other ways.
And what's really funny is I think about when I like kind of touching on the topic of like who really is your friend, you know? I remember that, you know, what I had said about, you know, them coming to the hospital and stuff. It's funny because like a month later, maybe I was in the hospital getting chemotherapy for one of my rounds. And, you know, when you're on chemotherapy, you can't eat much. Like there's not much you want to eat. You throw everything up. And I remember all I wanted was pizza. That was all I wanted. Like there was nothing else on the planet I wanted. And my mom couldn't leave to go get it because she had to stay with me. And my dad was working and I didn't have anybody bring it to me. And I remember texting you and I was like, yeah, all I want right now is pizza. And you happened to work at a pizza place at the time. And you brought a whole pizza to the hospital without me even asking, brought a whole pizza to the hospital, came up to the 5th floor, sat in the room with me and ate it with me. And you sat there for like 2 hours, just keeping me company while I got chemotherapy. And it's just, that right there just really shows me when someone's heart is in something. Because like in that time, I could really tell your heart was in ministry. Your heart was in like being there for people and actually like living that out in your life. Whereas youth pastor was not. It was very for show, you know. It was just, oh, I need to go and grab this picture so I can post it. Whereas like I didn't even ask you and you brought the one thing that I wanted and then actually sat and like gave me your company while I was going through this. And like I never even asked for that. And so like it's just really funny to see the comparison of like parallel situations almost, but like how they were handled different based on if your heart's in it or not.
Yeah, no. I mean, I kind of forgot about that, but I
never forgot about that.
I do think it's funny. I've done a lot of research recently into, I don't want to say church failures, but like transparency coming out in the church and how some ministers have done a very good job with that. And there have been some really bad failures of just, you know, either SA or drug abuse, you know, you name it.
Yeah.
And why do you think that's been an issue that's really come to light in the past like 5-10 years? Because I don't remember it being that bad when I was younger. Maybe I'm misremembering things.
Well, the thing is, specifically with like, we'll just go based off of like specifically, for example, pastors.
Yeah.
For instance, like I think of Hillsong a lot when I think of it since the documentary was out and everything.
Oh yeah.
I just think it's the church does such a good job at silencing people, and it does a really good job of like, oh, we don't talk about that. And so if there is some sort of scandal, they try to bury it really fast because they don't want a bad rep. And I just think it's interesting, like back in like the 90s, even you go back, you get these like cultish churches you think of, and they're very much cases of like, I don't remember what documentary it was I was watching, but it was about a cult. It was about like a church cult. And it basically like they would send these girls off to this camp because they were like bad kids or whatever. And they sent them off to this church camp. But it was really just the pastor was just like assaulting them.
Oh, geez.
The whole time pretty much. And it was like, it wasn't talked about. Because the church does such a good job at just being like, oh, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Or just invalidating. I feel like they do a really good job, specifically purity culture. They do a very, very, very good job at making women feel like it's their fault if they get assaulted.
Yeah.
Because they use the verse of like, oh, don't cause men to stumble. And so then if a man stumbles, it's your fault.
Yeah, which is totally taken out of context,
right?
you know.
Which is, it's funny because if you actually read on, it actually says if a man should stumble, he should gouge his eyes out.
Yeah.
And I just think it's funny that the church actually never talks about that. I didn't know that verse existed until like 2 years ago when I found it myself.
Well, and I heard a guy having a conversation recently of how the lady that was caught in adultery, caught in the act, and the men wanted to stone her, but they never talked about the man.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought about that. I'm like, wow, I know, like, obviously not everyone treats situations like that way. And there are, I think part of the issue is that headlines tend to focus on negative press because it gets more clicks. But it is shocking how there have been so many people recently who have been caught in this. And then their reaction has been like, I didn't do this.
Yeah.
This isn't my fault. That part has really shocked me, you know?
Well, and like, there's like the whole, you probably heard of it, like the whole man versus bear debate.
Oh, I haven't heard this.
You haven't heard of it?
No,
Basically,
I love this.
It's been this question of if like if a woman in your life that you really care about, say like your mom, your sister, whatever, if your sister were to end up in the woods by herself, would you prefer her come across a bear or a man?
Oh.
Yeah.
I feel myself wanting to say bear.
Exactly.
Which is
and it's funny because
terrible.
if you go on the internet, 99.9% of women say the bear. My answer is the bear.
Interesting.
Even I asked my dad which he would prefer me to come across, and it took him a while, you know, to decide, because he was like, I don't want to pick that, and I was like, you have to pick one.
Yeah,
He's
you have
like,
to pick
if I
one.
have to, I'm gonna say the bear. And I just think that question in and of itself is just really funny, because like ironic funny, because like bears, it's just, I don't know. I could go on about this forever,
Yeah.
but basically it's just interesting because people want to use like the whole phrase of like, not all men. Sure, but all women. That's where the issue really lies. It's like, yeah, it's not all men, but the problem is that almost every woman has experienced it.
Well, and I think the other issue is people are so extreme in their responses. Either they say it never happens, or every man's a predator.
Yeah.
And like, so I've caught myself recently with, you know, what I've kind of been through. Part of the struggle has been, there's just been, you know, a lot of accusations that just aren't true. But I now have caught myself thinking, oh, if I hear an accusation about someone, I don't necessarily know what to believe. I kind of want to see where the truth is and do my own research,
right,
because at this point, anything is possible. What do you think we can do? I don't want to say as a society, because that's so grandiose, you know, but I guess as like normal Christians, as bad of a word as normal is, what can we do to, I guess, help the perception, both from like the ministry standpoint of like, are there things that you think we could change, and also from like the human connection standpoint?
Well, I think at the root of the issue, we need to not preach the culture of boys will be boys. That's a big root issue. I personally, let's put it this way. In youth group, when we've had the talk, you know, that sermon, where they split up the boys and the girls. Yeah. It's really funny, because every time I've had that sermon many times throughout middle and high school, based on different places I've been and whatever. Every single time, the girls get taken off into a room to get talked to about purity and about, you know, making sure you don't cause men to stumble, and making sure you're wearing appropriate clothes, and making sure like you don't lead a man on. And what did the boys do? They go play basketball. Yeah. And I think that always made me mad. Like, that always really pissed me off, because I was like, why are we teaching women this? Why are we teaching young girls this? But boys aren't taught responsibility. Like, that's where the issue lies, because then when something does arise, like, the woman is always blamed. Well, what were you wearing? Well, where were you? Well, were you alone? Well, why were you alone? And it's just like all those things of like, well, it's stupid to go out alone. Why would you go out alone? Yeah,
you're almost negating the person's
It's just crazy
humanity.
Because like, you're telling them that it's their fault for going out alone, but why isn't it the guy's fault for having that thought in the first place? Yeah. You know? And I think that's a big thing in the church, is we don't hold boys accountable, and we don't teach them, hey, maybe don't assault a woman. Yeah. Well,
and I think also the other issue is we don't have good conversations from both sides
Yeah.
about not just like intimacy, but also people's thought lives.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even as I've grown up, when I went to ministry college, I know that their intentions were good. Back on like having good intentions but doing the wrong thing.
Right.
The way that they handled porn and that conversation was completely different than how like the recovery groups do it.
Right.
And it was more of like, just stop, just don't even try.
Yeah.
And the recovery groups talk about, admitting your faults, getting in community, like working through steps together. It seems like there is a lack of community aspect. Where do you think that started or came from? Or do you think that's just kind of an issue of being human?
I think the church, I mean, in the Bible, it talks about all sin being equal. And I feel like the church doesn't treat it that way. I think the church will commit sins of their own and then like, they literally do what the Bible says not to do about like pointing out the speck in your brother's eye when you got a plank in your own.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I just think it's funny because they treat sins unequal. They don't like to treat everything equal, and they like to kind of be like, oh, that's a bad one. Like, different, just with any sort of stuff. Like if you commit, I don't know, you commit murder, and yeah, that's bad. But the Bible also says that lying is just as bad.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
I just think from maybe like a moral standpoint, a law standpoint, yeah, murder is probably bad. But in God's eyes, lying is just as bad.
Well,
So
Jesus
there's-
says if you hate someone in your heart, you've already committed murder.
Right. So I think the church needs to do a better job at just treating everything equally and not like treating some things as taboo. Like, oh, we don't talk about that. Like, it's strange to me,
Well, one thing I respect about you that I've seen over the last like 3 or 4 years is you've, I think, taken that to the best extreme possible, in the sense of you're friends with people that some church communities would consider like outcasts or wrong or ugly or bad. And they have so much respect for you, and they know your stance.
Yeah. Well, because here's my thing. Jesus ate at the table with sinners.
Yeah.
He had meals with them, which back in those days, having a meal with somebody, actually, I was just learning about this. There was this couple back in old times, and she was, I don't want to get this wrong, but it was something to the effect of like, she was Jewish and he wasn't, or vice versa, or whatever. And basically it was seen as he couldn't even eat in the same room as her because having a meal with her would consider him unclean. And I thought that was interesting because the Bible talks about how Jesus had a meal with sinners. He sat at their table and he ate with them. And that, in that culture, would have made him unclean, People didn't do that back then. Like, if you were an adulterer, you were outcast. You were not spoken to. You were not looked at. You were not, even like women on their period, they were unclean. You were not to associate with them for that whole time. And I just think it's such a good takeaway from the Bible that Jesus ate with sinners, because in my line of thinking, with the way that I have perceived the Bible, is you don't change your lifestyle before receiving God's love. You change your lifestyle because of God's love. Like when you receive, like, for somebody that has not been a Christian ever, once they experience Jesus's love, they will slowly want to start changing. Because God will instill that in them. He will put that desire in them to be a better person. It doesn't happen the other way around. And I feel like a lot of churches will be like, you need to repent and change your life before you can come to Christ.
They expect moralism.
Right. And that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to share God's love with you.
Yeah.
My responsibility isn't to tell you you're a dirty, rotten sinner and you're going to hell.
Yeah. And, I will say, like, of all the the struggles I've had with past leaders, one leader that I'm thinking of in particular who, wasn't really the best, he did mention that always stuck out to me of like, I don't have to convict someone. Like, that's not my job.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. I'm like, oh, I feel like it's not necessarily that I've gotten it backwards, but I've assumed that the way to convict people is with my words.
Right.
And not realizing that Jesus was very, very kind to people. I mean, even the woman caught in adultery, he never, he asked her to go and sin no more, but he never called her for what she is.
Right.
And why do you think that we struggle with that as Christians?
I think
easy answer,
it's honestly a hard thing for me to even answer because I can't fully comprehend why.
Yeah, you can't speak for every Christian ever.
Why would somebody I can't comprehend how somebody could do that. Like in what I've read, like if we're reading the same Bible, God is love. That's like bottom line, Jesus died for us because he loves us. That's the bottom line.
For God so loved the world.
Right. We love because he first loved us. Like if you look, it literally says that God is love. God is the definition of love. And so why are we as a quote unquote religion, why are we spreading so much hate? That doesn't make sense to me because our religion, I don't like calling it, I won't call myself religious. Because I'm not. I even teeter on calling myself a Christian because that has a really bad rap with people.
Yeah, it does.
I just say I love Jesus. Like that's where I stand on it. I love Jesus because I do. I have a relationship with him. I don't practice a religion because that's not what Jesus is about. Jesus was actually against religion. If you read in the Bible, it says he hated religion. He didn't like the religious authorities in the churches. Like he went in a rage flipping tables because he was angry that they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
But off on a tangent. I just can't understand how if our entire religion is built on love, how are you not loving everyone? Like, I can't comprehend that. So I honestly couldn't even answer why, because it's beside me.
Yeah, and I think like a good point is I think what Jesus was really angry about is the abuse of religion. Right. And I think about like the interactions I've had, and it almost seems like it's I'm more superior because I know more scriptures than you. And me and my dad had this conversation of like how he used to go to this old church like 25 years ago that he doesn't even remember the name of. And you like this. So he goes up to a person, they're like, "Hi, I'm Brother Tom," or something like that. And then the first thing they say is, "So I've been reading the Bible recently." And it's like, he made a point of like, it's almost as if they're trying to show how much they know, and that's how they value themselves.
Right.
And then I kind of thought about myself. I'm like, how often have I kind of assumed that I'm the best voice for people? And I mean, your life is a good example.
Yeah.
And thank God I've been proven wrong. Because if I was, I'd be a very terrible voice. And, so what do you think we can do to help, I don't understand people that don't believe like us, or also just be more Christian than we could be, So
for me, the way I live my life is everyone knows I love Jesus. I'm very open about that. I tell everyone about it. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to tell people about Jesus. Hey, he loves you. Like, you can love him too. So everybody knows that, but it's funny because a lot of people end up being shocked by that because they're like, I have gay friends, some of my closest friends, they're gay. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, why are you friends with them?"
Yeah, people are so weird about that.
Because they're a human being and I love them. What do you mean? And because that's not my problem. Like, I'm here to love them. Doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm here to show them. And that's just an example that, like, the church is up in arms about. And it's like, why do you care so much about what they're doing? They don't care about your sin. Yeah. Quote unquote. Like, why are you?
Yeah. And I also think like, so, I mean, that people have been shocked about that as well with me too. And it's like, well, if I ever actually wanted to convert them, wouldn't the best way to do it to be their friend and be nice?
To love them? Wow.
And, you know,
crazy concept.
And like, I still have to like search within myself to make sure like, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Right.
But I feel like I've gotten better to this place where I'm going to show them God's love by the way I treat them, the way I speak about them.
Right.
And if they choose to do that, it wasn't my power to save them in the first place. It was God. You know.
The thing is, like, for instance, I have one of my best friends. She grew up in a very not Christian household. It was never talked about. She didn't have any knowledge of it really. And we had worked together, and she asked me one day while we were working, she was like, "How do you believe in God?" She was like, I can't fathom that. How do you believe in God? Because it just doesn't make sense to me. It's such a foreign concept. And it kind of took me back in a way, because I've always been surrounded by, even if you aren't a Christian, you have a reason to not be one, you know?
Yeah.
But for her, it was just kind of like she just couldn't fathom the concept because it was never taught to her. And so I just told her my personal reasoning for it, you know, like my testimony, my personal experiences, and why, you know, my journey of actually believing in him. And at the end of it, you know, she was kind of like, that's interesting. And then she was like, well. And that was pretty much it. And I was like, okay. And I told her, I said, I'm here if you have any more questions or anything. And it's funny because, like, fast forward a few years, we're still really good friends, and we talk all the time. And she'll randomly ask me, like, can you and your mom pray for me for this? Because, like, I don't know why, but every time I ask you to and you do, something good happens.
Interesting.
And it makes me giggle because I'm like, that's kind of cool. Because then she's now gotten to the point where this last time she asked me, like, oh, can you and your mom pray for me about this job thing or whatever? Because, like, I don't know what kind of good juju y'all got, but, like, every time you do, something good happens. And I'm like, girl, it's not me, it's all God. And she goes, I know, but you guys have an in with him. And I'm like, girl, you have an in with him too. And she was like, I know, but you get it. And so she's, like, getting to this point where she's acknowledging that there's a God, and she's actually like talking about him as an entity, as a being, and, like, acknowledging that that's a thing. She's just not quite to the point of being there. And I just think it's really cool to, like, to show, like, I love this girl so much. Like, I would die for her.
Well,
I
can
really
tell there's
would.
no ulterior motive
And
in you,
right, and
you know?
and like the reason I'm so passionate about showing her God's love and helping her actually, like, learn about him and whatnot is because I love her so much that I want her to experience the things that I've experienced from God. Like, I want her to experience the peace that God has given me, you know? That's my motive is I love her so much that I want, and that's how I am with all of my friends. That's how I am with everybody that I know and care about. And if anybody that knows me, that really knows me, knows, like, I love everyone I meet. Like, unless you have really wronged me, I still love you. I just, you know, maybe from a distance, but
yeah. And I also think that people, their understanding of love is incorrect. Right. So I actually ran to a guy literally today, and I had a conversation with him because he was trying to grapple with the idea of, like, well, I love this person, but I guess I don't love them because I'm very wary of them. I'm like, well, you can love someone, but it's smart to have healthy boundaries based on their past actions as well as, like, their ability to admit they're wrong. And I think, why do you think it's hard for people to describe what love is in the first place? Because we've heard it before, like, oh, Christians don't love gay people. And it's like, well, I personally love you, but I also don't have to agree with what you do, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. You know, how does that work? I guess?
Think love in our society has such a misconstrued concept. Like, it's such a everybody has different definitions of it, you know? Like, it's a word that's very thrown around, but it's also a word that's very confusing for people, because, like, some people think love is, oh, I love this person. Some people like, I don't know, for me, like, love is just a very confusing concept in our society, I feel like, because it has so many different definitions. And it's thrown around a lot. But I feel like, as a quote unquote Christian, like, if we're called to love. And so that's what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to love. Even if I don't like you, I'm going to love you. You know, like there are a lot of people that I have come across that I really don't like, but I love them. I hope the best for them. I hope I will see them in heaven, maybe from a distance, but I hope I will see them in heaven. And I feel like that's at the bottom of it. You're going to find the true definition of love in the Bible. I mean, that's from what I've learned. I mean, I've gone through ups and downs of what love actually is just based off of like past relationships and things. I was told I'm unlovable. I was told that I couldn't be loved by anyone. And it's like, I just think about that. And I'm like, at the time, that really cut deep. 6 years later, I'm at a point where I'm like, no, I couldn't have your version of love.
Yeah, you were wrong. You know,
like I couldn't have your perception of love.
Yeah.
That's what you were saying. Your perception of love was not possible to be given to me. Actual, true, genuine love is freely given to me every day.
Yeah.
So like, it's just such a confused concept in our society, I feel like.
Yeah, and I mean, I even, you know, I look at 1 Corinthians 13, which is such it's a weird verse because everyone uses it for marriage, and it's like, well, it's a bit more than that, but, you know, thinking like, okay, love is patient, love is kind, it doesn't envy, it doesn't boast, it keeps no record of wrong. And then I kind of, first I look at myself and have I done a good job with that? And, you know, quite often the answer is absolutely not, you know? But the goal, if I'm going to love someone, it's going to be patient when I don't feel like it, and be kind when it's not easy, you know, not going to keep wrong when I really want to. And then I also kind of look at my close friends, and I think the reason why like we're still friends and the people that am in my life right now is because I feel like love really shows itself when someone doesn't have anything to gain from your success. Yeah. You know?
Well, funny little segue into this. I feel like personally, I mean, piggybacking off what I was just talking about being loved, like I have been told by tons of people that they love me in my life from till when I was a kid till now. I've been told I love you by numerous different types of people. And each time I was told that by different people, their love for me looked different. It was, some people would say they loved me and then they would abuse me. Some people said they loved me and then they didn't care about my feelings and didn't invite me to stuff. Or some people would say they love me, but then they would turn around and say that I'm annoying and need to shut up. Like, and then I had some people on the other hand, like my parents tell me they love me every day. And I genuinely feel it because they have such selfless love for me.
Yeah.
My sibling-in-laws tell me they love me. And like, though it doesn't get said often, I know it. I can feel it.
You can see it.
And it's funny because for the last like year and a half, I had really, really, really bad struggles with friends. Friends that told me they loved me. Friends that told me they, you know, were there for me and loved me. And it just, they weren't. They didn't love me. And from being told that by all sorts of different people and getting all sorts of different outcomes by being told they love me, love was a very confusing concept for me, because when somebody told me they loved me, at some point I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, what is that? Because I had been told that by everyone, but the outcome was different every time. And so even like getting into my relationship with my husband now, like when we first started dating and he first told me like, oh, I love you, like I was confused. I didn't really know. I was like, what does that even mean? Because I don't really understand that concept anymore. And it took me a long time to actually learn what actual unconditional love meant, like true biblical love, you know? And it's funny because I had that from him. So many friends in my life I was not getting that out of, and they were telling me they loved me and they weren't. They didn't. And everything blew up, you know? Everything blew up. I lost all my friends. It was a mess. And piggybacking off of like losing people in the church, being like cast out from the church, losing all my friends, I was in a very dark place like last year. Really dark place. Didn't talk to anybody, hid in my house. I just got really depressed, and and really started leaning into that I'm unlovable sort of feeling. But it's really funny how God works, because he will pick the most ironic timings to do stuff. Because right in that pit was when he kind of like stumbled me across the House of Right Nature. And I was so scared to be friends with people there, because I had been so hurt by friends, and it was a mixture of friends and the church, because it's this Christian organization,
It's a parachurch
and it's all
ministry,
these people that are my age, and I'm like, mainly girls too, and I have a really hard time making friends with girls because they're just mean. But it's crazy, because the first couple times I started like going to their Bible study and stuff, I was very scared. I was very anxious. But it was like one of the first times I felt true, genuine love from strangers. Like these people didn't know me, but I could feel the love that they had for me. And to this day, like now I'm really, really good friends with these girls, and I know I can feel that they have that true biblical love for me. And I can see what it actually means, you know, because they do have, like, they are patient with me. They're selfless. They're kind. They're gentle. They're like they are all of the fruits of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And that's what love is, you know.
Preacher brother, let's go.
Like they do practice 1 Corinthians 13. Like it's not just a thing of they quote it all the time and they have a shirt that says it, you know, they actually live that out in their day-to-day lives without even thinking about it half the time. Like that's just how they are. And I just think that that's really cool, because that also helped me kind of like, it helped me get back into reading the Bible and being more open to the church and stuff. And I'm still very weary about churches in general. Like my opinion on them is very odd, just because I feel like, not to go too far off on a tangent, but I just feel like church has strayed very far from what it was in the Bible, what Jesus meant church to be, because the church is the body of Christ. It's not a building. And I don't know. I feel like churches as a whole have become too business setting, and I don't like that. But I really was intrigued by Ride Nature, because they're not a church, but they are, because they're the body of Christ, you know, and that's what they live for.
That's the real church.
It is the real church. And so
what a shock.
I actually got to, like, I've read through the Bible probably 3 times in my life. I had to graduate, which is weird. I had to graduate. I memorized everything for Bible quiz. And like I was talking about previously, it kind of numbs you to what the Bible actually means. And recently, in the last few months, I started like really getting into reading my Bible again and actually understanding what things mean. And it's been really funny. I almost feel like a baby Christian again, because I mean, to be fair, I never was a baby Christian, because I grew up in it and I knew it.
Yeah.
And even though I know these verses by heart and I could quote them, I never really knew them. I never really got the context and understood it until now. And I remember, like, I keep reading things and I like run to my mom and I'm like, Mom, look at this. This is so crazy. Like, look at what this means. And it's just been really cool to actually grasp that understanding and get the context behind it all. And it's, you know, it took me a long time to kind of open up to going to church again. I did find a small church that I have started going to in the last couple months, but it's definitely a church that's more in line with what I agree with. But I mean, by all means, I don't like Lecrae said it best. I'm a Christian and I don't go to church. Like you know.
I think that one thing I like about your story is that it's not sanitized. Yeah. You know, you're very honest about like your struggles, not only personal, but like the experiences that you've had, and you don't retreat in yourself. You know, it's almost it is very Christ-like, but it's almost very beautiful of how you're like, okay, these are issues, but I want to be better, and I want to work through that. So it's been a pleasure having you. You're like one of the few people that I'm like, I really want her on this podcast. But before you go, I just have one simple question. Yeah. What makes you a successful failure? You're not getting out of this question. Everyone's got to answer it.
What makes me a successful failure?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like my life has been one, like, falling on my face over another. It's just been constant. Like, I get up and then my shoe comes untied, and all the time. It's like my shoes are never tied. I don't know. I haven't learned how to tie them, apparently.
Freaking shoes.
But I don't know. I think if I had to be conceited, I would say I don't like talking about myself in a good light. But if I had to be conceited, I would say I think what would make me successful, a successful failure, would just be that I learn from it, I guess. I try to take it and make myself better because of it. I definitely have not always been good at that. That's something I've been having to learn to do recently. But I feel like I take all of these times that I'm falling flat on my face, and I'm just kind of trying to see where I can grow from it. Or even if I don't need to grow from it, but I need to help other people grow from it, like how I can use my experiences and my pain and my falling on my face to maybe change things.
I think that's an excellent answer. Awesome. Glad you came, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Wow. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I thought it was extremely raw and real, but I think very beneficial, especially if you've dealt with church hurt in the past and are not sure about where to move on with that. I think this episode was good for me. I liked listening to it. So thank you so much for joining us. Once again, if you'd like to support us, that'd mean the world to me. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you get your major podcasts, we'll be there. And hope to see you next week. Thank you so much.
From it. Or even if I don't need to grow from it, but I need to help other people grow from it, like how I can use my experiences and my pain and my falling on my face to maybe change things.
I think that's an excellent answer. Awesome. Glad you came, and hope you have a great day.
Thanks.